Bryan. We're so
Hey,
happy to see you again. How's things going?
things are going really well. Just busy, but good. And it's good to see both of you guys again.
So tell us what's new.
Pat, did you just say really? Like you didn't believe it was good to see
No, I
both of
said
you?
it is.
Oh,
It is good to see us
yeah, yeah.
again.
Like, oh, maybe you're not used to that. Yeah, I mean, we're recording this the day before my second book comes out. So
Dun,
that's,
dun, dun, dun.
it's not new yet, I guess, but it's new.
It's pre-new.
Yeah, it's
Well, I
Peru.
guess it's not new for you.
No, God, I've been like full on with this thing for a little while, but yeah, so that's kind of like eating my life at the moment in a good way. I'm happy about that. It's great that this day is here because I did a TED talk on it in August of 2018.
Yep.
And so people are like, when's your book coming out? I'm like, right before that TED talk. And they're like, wait, didn't that happen like last year? I'm like, yeah, that's when I was aiming to have it out. It's still not out yet, but it's coming out now. Yeah, it's coming out August of 2018.
Yeah.
And here we are at the end of 2019, but it's coming out now. Like it had to be ready. Like it had to be right. I'm not going to put it out prematurely.
Plus,
Yep.
people have to be more specific when they ask that question. Like when they say, when's it coming out? And you say August of 2018, it came out of your mind then. It just didn't come out in hard copy for them yet.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. It was
How long have you
like
been
a spiritual thing.
Yeah. How long have you been writing this book then, Bryan?
This one was a while. It's just because I had so much else. So like my first book, I expected it. This is going to sound terrible. I expected it to die off a lot faster than it did. Like, let's think of a nicer way to say that. But I thought it would run its course, but it didn't. And that's great. So it's for a good reason, but it also meant I was really I had a full-time job and I was still very much promoting that. So in the time where outside of work, where I would have been writing, I was doing podcast interviews and other stuff. I started writing for Inc. So like I had all these things going on that weren't writing this book.
Right.
So it took, I don't know, like about 2 years probably to come out. The first one was really fast to write and long to edit. The second was really long to write, but a lot faster to edit.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Similar timing. This was definitely longer, but not too much longer, but it's just role reversal. It was just for me to like get the mental focus and enough consistent time to sit down and work on it. And there's a lot of research in this one. The last one really just came out of my head. Like it's stuff I've been living and coaching on for years. This I had to look into like Buddhism. I had to read a bunch of other books. I had to grow as a human being. It's all
That's
good
always
stuff.
a good idea.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your first book. Tell our audience a little bit about Do a Day.
Yeah, so Do a Day is it is a story of my life and the lessons that I learned from it. So basically, I had some serious issues with anxiety from my parents' divorce. So going back to relationships early on, I was really little. I was like 5 years old, and that child's need of feeling like everything's okay. I didn't feel that, and so I searched outside for that. Food was my drug of choice, and I got really obese really fast, and even though I lost weight in high school, I lost 100 pounds, I didn't deal with the anxiety. And so it just continued to get worse. I put back on much of the weight, found myself 32 years old, married, father of a 2-year-old, and suddenly my wife became incredibly ill to the point that she wasn't expected to survive the summer. And it was in this moment with a call with her doctor. I should say she is still alive. So let me preface the story with that. Half
and
the time
we're so glad.
I forget to say that. And people are like, wait,
yeah.
Not that I don't know, but yeah, it was, I just get caught up in the story. So yeah, her doctor's just like, yeah, I'm going on vacation, nothing else to do. We'll talk in 6 weeks. And like, if you did the math on how much weight she was losing, she'd been bedridden at that point. Like, she's not going to be here in 6 weeks. And like, oh, okay, call the ER, and he hung up. So kind of a shocking call. And it forced me to wake up in a lot of ways. And what I discovered about myself is I wasn't living the way I wanted to. I certainly wasn't there for my wife and son the way I needed to be because of my anxiety and how it was just sort of engulfing everything about me. And granted, like, this is a very anxiety fueling time. Like looking at my wife dying and leaving me with a 2-year-old, and I got to work full time and somehow be responsible for his happiness. And I'm like flailing, I'm splashing about in the water, taking big gulps of salt water in. I'm not going to make it.
Well, and I feel like for anybody, that just the idea of that's terrifying.
Yeah, for sure.
That as in and of itself, regardless of whether or not you ever had anxiety, that would bring on immense anxiety.
Yeah. I mean, the problem though is that also reinforced my anxiety response as the right response. Because my anxiety, as bad as it was saving me. It made me like constantly think the sky was falling and constantly jump into action and fix things. So it had a lot of pluses. Like, I was very reliable. I was super self-reliant. Like, I could sustain myself through anything. Like, if you needed something done, just get Bryan there. I was a management consultant, so my job was to look around for problems, spot them, and fix them before they blow up. So it's like my job reinforced it too. Yep. So it had pluses, but the negatives were I was constantly in fight or flight mode. I was not too enjoyable to be around. I didn't have time for emotions. Get out of my way and stop it. You just have to do X, Y, Z, and I got to do this stuff over here. And which is not really what a 2-year-old needs when they're like watching their mother die in front of their eyes.
What? So just real quick, I'm curious. Anxieties, it's the same and it's different for everyone. So when we talk about anxiety, I mean, my anxiety is way different than Sam's, but
for sure.
How did yours like manifest?
Mine sounds
itself?
Like yours.
Yeah. How did yours manifest itself internally? So
yeah,
there's the external part, which you kind of just touched on. But what was it like for you, like inside when you talked about it? Because that's usually where it's the worst, right?
Yeah. Well, it's funny, Sam. Like I read that when we were in San Francisco together. Like I read that, I'm like, we're wired the same.
We are
similarly. Yeah.
Yep. And I even had jobs where I was in charge of, either anticipating all the problems and making sure they were corrected before that, or going into big, messy situations that just needed me to grind it out.
You're like, you're the one they shot into things to just make it work. You brought order to chaos and fixed it. Yeah, I get that.
And you too. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, it is a very overwhelming sense of this is the worst thing I've ever faced, and I'm not going to get through it. And so there's like this scramble inside, Pat. That's like the best way that I can describe it. I mean, I have memories of like college. My dad would call to say hi, and I'd be like, I can't talk. I've got this big exam tomorrow or this paper. And it was like everyone was going to be the one I flunked out on. Right. And it's like, dude, you got like a 3.8 something GPA. Like, really? When are you going to wake up and be like, you're not going to flunk out? And even if you fail that test, you'll still be okay. But it's like I had it stuck in my head that it's always the worst thing I've ever faced. And anyone trying to justify otherwise to me just doesn't understand. Only I could possibly understand how terrible this is.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, very much a sense of like, I'm the only one who can make this okay. And nobody understands the gravity of the situation, which only makes it more dangerous. Sure. Because it's like, they're going to get in the way.
Because it creates kind of this, I'm still apologizing to Patty because even up to my TEDx talk, like I've been really self-absorbed, you know, like in my own world, like I really need to make this good. And I really think it's important, but I mean, really how important is it? Probably not that important. Well, you know what I mean?
The people like me are trying to talk her down off the edge or saying, it's not that big of a deal. Just go out there and have fun. What's the worst thing that could happen? Okay, you get booed or something. Big deal. You don't really care what people think anyway. So,
which is true.
But that's not how anxiety works for her.
No.
It just stays on the inside boiling, and rationale is not a part of the recipe to heal anxiety.
No, it isn't. It isn't. But what's really funny is like, as much as I recognize that in myself, I'll still try to rationalize when someone else is in the throes of it and like explain to them why super hypocritical.
Yeah.
It's really funny. Like in watching your, Facebook Live that you did afterward. And I wrote like, awesome. Like right away, just at the beginning when you're like, so I just did the TED Talk. But there's something about how you were that wasn't sitting right with me. And I had this feeling inside, and I'm like, well, maybe it's just like you're spent, or, there's travel involved. Like, so I was trying not to project myself onto it. But as soon as I wrote awesome, then you're like, and then the mic cut out. And I'm like, oh, why did you write that so fast? Like you should have trusted your guy. But as you're describing it, honestly, I start shouting. I'm like, tell them you want to start over. Like you can hear me.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I'm sitting here, I'm like, no, you need to do this and you need to do this. And you like take control and make it right. It's like, dude, this already happened in the past. Like I was at least a few minutes behind you starting the live. I didn't tune in right at the beginning. So it's like yelling at the TV, like tell that man not to walk in front of the gun.
Yeah.
It's so funny though. You'll notice though, if you go through the comments, there's a lot of people who have one comment and then there's two or three more that are like, oh gosh, shoot, or you handled it well. The people that were there were like, it was, whatever. It was fine. I didn't mean to get off on the TEDx thing, but I just know that anxiety, and I think all anxiety to some degree, is really self-absorbed. It's like looking so inward. And although I really believe in looking inward, at some point you have to remember, like, there's other people around you.
Yeah. And that's, it does come from some insecurity inside.
Yeah.
And everyone's paying a price for that, including you. The question is whether you value yourself enough to think you're worth not living that way for. Because as much as I believe in living better for, or being better for your kids or your spouse or whoever that matters so much to you, if it never gets to the point of mattering to you, you're always going to have to actively control it rather than changing and being a better version of yourself. Because there's a piece of you that doesn't love you enough to make it worth that work. So it's like, I just have to do this for them. And that was my big transformation. Thank you.
Yeah.
So you're going through that transformation, your kids too, your wife's been, your doctor's even given up on your wife.
Yeah. He should have had his license pulled for that, to be honest.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway. So that, like, I got off the call, I walked into our bedroom, my son turned and looked at me like he's looking at his mother stuck in bed, and he turns and looks at me, and I'm done. Like, that's when it all hit me, is like, what are you doing? Like, how is it that you're living? This poor woman's suffering, and all you can do is like tell her why she needs to do this and do that. And like, when the doctors are like, you're doing this to yourself, you're just, really anxious and you seem depressed, and you're like, yeah, well, you need to snap out of it. And you're like, that's not helping. Like an airplane, when everyone's lining up to smack the woman who's hysterical, like it doesn't actually work. I wasn't smacking her, but like effectively, I wasn't like, she just needed an arm around her to be like, I'm here with you. You're not alone.
Sure.
Well said also.
Yeah. It's funny because like when my son was an infant and she was breastfeeding him, he had a lot of feeding issues and was underweight. And so it was a lot of work. It was like constant feedings. And I would stay up with her, through the night in every one of those feedings, because I just didn't want her to be alone in that process.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, where's that version of me? That like, that's what she needs. And she remembers, she's like, that touched me in such a way. I never expected that. And it always just like warmed my heart to know, like, you're right there with me. And then fast forward like 2 years later and I'm not.
Yeah.
So it was that different version of me. And then for my son, like, I had all these issues from my parents' divorce, but neither of my parents died. Now, watching your mother die when you're 2 and they were so close, that is a transformational experience. And if, like, I love him more than anything, and I just want him to be happy in life. And if a big part of that happiness is going to come from what I'm able to do for him through his life and what I'm able to show him and support him and help him feel, and this is the way I am, and this is the father I am, like, this is not acceptable. He deserves better. So for the two of them, I was called into action to change my life. I wasn't yet ready to do it for myself. And that took, honestly, like through writing the book. So 6 years later,
right,
of continued work, continued exploration, to be able to look back and be like, actually, I'm worth a damn. And I was not at that place because there was no space for me in my mind. Because if I do that, then all these things that depend on me fall apart. And so I think a big piece is like, I'm just scared to make room for myself, which is funny because the few times I did, I felt super selfish. And I think I came off really selfish because I was acting so weird about it.
Interesting. Go into that a little bit more because, I think, I don't know, we talk a lot about self-love and really working on that and working on yourself as a person. And we talk about self-full instead of selfishness, I know this is the same message. You just have you have your own way of talking about that. So.
Yeah. I think that it's like with the relationship stuff I talk about, like if your expectation is that the person's going to yell at you for what you're about to say, you're probably not going to say it in a way that doesn't elicit a yell. Like, you're going to go into it afraid. You're going to hold back. My wife and I are going through that right now. Like, there's something I know, like, she's not going to want to hear. In the past, she's not been supportive when I've brought stuff like this to her.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go into it, like she told me, she's like, you're being really weird. And I'm like, yeah, I am. You're right. And it's because I'm afraid of how you might react. She's like, you're not even giving me a chance to react better. You've like preemptively set me up to not react well because you're being really weird about it. And it was
Yeah,
like,
good point.
yeah. So, we go into anything like that. So if I'm going into like, I was just telling someone I like, we're all, up on the weekend, like, family time, whatever. And I wanted to go ride my bike trainer in the garage, even though it's super cold out. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I wanted to. And in the past, if I did something like that, I'd be like, oh, this is really like, that's me time. And I wake up really early for my workouts so that I'm not taking away from family time. And how dare I do that? And what's she going to think? Is this going to impact her? Is she going to be mad for me? And I'm going into it with all those feelings. And so I'm like really weird about it and kind of sneaky and be like, oh, I'm just going to go into the garage for a minute. It's like, what? Why are you dressed like that? Why are you wearing spandex? And like, which is a different problem. But then it's like, I'm just going to go ride in the garage for a half an hour. She's like, why are you doing that? Because then it's like, I'm being really sneaky about it. And it's like, you didn't tell me that. And now I'm stuck because you didn't, like, I was going to go do something, but now I can't. Versus like, hey, I was thinking about riding on my trainer for 30 minutes. Are you cool with that? Is there a time that works well? Yeah. Why don't you do it at this time? Cool. But instead I'm like sneaking around, I'm afraid. So I set myself up. And I just said to someone, I was like, yeah, I've been doing this every weekend now, Saturdays and Sundays. And it's like, she's not even phased in the slightest about it. She and my son will make fun of what I'm wearing. That's about it. And then I walk back in and they're like, oh, block your eyes. But it's not like, how dare you? And so it was very selfish because I've made it this more emotional thing. It's like I say with food, like food wasn't just for sustenance. It was filling this emotional hole.
Mm-hmm.
So like it had so much more power over me versus now, like I just eat because I have to eat at some point during the day to fuel my body.
Right.
And it doesn't have any power over me. But I made these little acts of me time matter in a negative way because I was being like sneaky because I was afraid of, and I wasn't doing it consciously, but I was afraid of how they'd be perceived. And I just set them up to be perceived that way.
Yeah, it's kind of like this, we talk sometimes about the stories that we tell ourselves. We get this movie reel of how things maybe have gone in the past. Maybe they haven't. Maybe you just have this expectation of how you think it's going to go or how you think they might react. And that creates it can create a whole movie in your head about what's going to happen and how she's going to react. And you don't even, like you said, you don't give them the opportunity to rise to the occasion and say, yeah, go take some me time.
Yeah.
We don't care. We'll see you in 30, whatever.
Yeah. No, and I mean, so not to shamelessly segue into my new book.
Yeah, let's do it. It's time.
But like that point actually that's a big piece of it, is giving them the opportunity to react differently. So the concept of the book is all about, in our relationships, like we own our half, they own theirs. And the problem with that notion that it stops there is that we feel really powerless. So we feel like they're doing this to me, they're treating me this way, they don't love me enough. What if they could just value me, love me, see me for who I am, stop like mistrusting me, whatever the what ifs and the whys are, and just love me or just accept me or be a better boss to me or value my contribution to the company or whatever the relationship situation is. But it's not 50-50, because actually half of what's going on inside of them is a response to us, just like half of what's going on inside of us is a response to them. Like we have our actions that we proactively put out there, but that's only half of us. The other half of us is how we respond to the world. And that dynamic exists in them. Only the world is us, which sounds super egotistical. But like in that context, we are the thing they're reacting to. So when I am like sneaking around in like looking like a ninja because I'm head to toe in tight clothes, I'm asking my wife to think something fishy's going on, versus just giving her a version of me that's open and honest and is a partner. It's like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Is that cool? Does that get in your way at all? When would be a good time for that? And, just giving her a chance to work with an equal and not someone who's like kind of without noticing it slips out the back door. Which makes me sound worse than I am.
Almost kind of trying to manipulate the situation in some way, even though it doesn't require manipulation.
Yeah. It's almost like you're manipulating it by not manipulating it. Like just give them a version of yourself that's honest and caring. And actually the place that I talk about coming from is understanding the happiness that they're seeking.
I love this concept.
Cool.
Go deep there. Go deep there.
Yeah. So the idea, and it comes from Buddhism. So I did not think this up, but the idea is ultimately all of us just seeks to be happy. And so often we lose sight of that in each other, and we think that the other person just seeks to make us miserable. And actually, like, that may be happening as a result of what they're doing. And maybe they don't understand their happiness, or they're choosing to go about it in a way that's harmful and not even helping them. But actually, like, when we get up in the morning, we're not like, oh, you know what today I'd like to do? I'd like to just make them cry. That'd be great. No, there's something that that person wants, and they happen to think that you're in the way. And even if they do get up and they're like, I want to make them cry, or I want to hurt them, the reason for that, and they may not understand this, but the reason for that comes from their desire to deal with some pain they're feeling.
Exactly.
And they think, this is a confusion, but they think that hurting you will take away their pain. And you know what? In the moment, it may do that. Just like I did with food, I thought that food would fill that hole, that emotional hole I had for feeling stability and feeling comfort. And it did in the moment. But then 5 minutes later, I'm empty again. You know, raising a hand or screaming at you may make them feel powerful in that moment. But 5 minutes later, they're back to that time when they were a little child and they were being abused or mistreated or felt powerless and scared. And so it's not that they just wanted to hurt you. There's a hurt inside of them that they're not able to get in touch with. And so they're lashing out because they think it will help them, whether it's a hit of a drug or a drink or a hit of a person. And I'm not saying any of these things is okay. And I'm not saying that you should stick around and be absorbing all that stuff.
Certainly not.
But it's not just to hurt you in and of itself. There is an underlying thing that they need that they may not even be aware of. And so the question is, how do you tap into that? And obviously there's different extremes here. And in some of them, you don't tap into it. You tap into a way to leave safely for yourself. But if it's not a situation where your life is in jeopardy, or your well-being is in jeopardy, or there isn't true mental illness afoot, what can you do to get in touch with what they actually want to achieve so that you can both coexist, getting closer to your happiness rather than working against it or sneaking around? So give them a version of you that shows them like, oh, this person actually is not working against me, so maybe I shouldn't work against them. And it almost happens subconsciously for them. You stop fighting them, they will stop fighting you. You give them a better version of you, it will change the dynamic between you, and you will spark a different version of them.
It's true. And you started off by talking about, it's half one person, half the other person, everybody 50-50. And there's an interesting, maybe you talk about this in your book. If so, feel free to elaborate, but it's an interesting concept because nobody's percentages are ever the same.
Yeah.
She might think, well, we're equal, we're both at fault. And I'm like, no, you're about 90% at fault. I barely did anything wrong at all.
Yeah.
I mean, that might be how the other person's thinking, but one of the things
that's always how the other person's thinking.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
Unless it's 0-100.
One of the most effective ways,
which I think is actually more what happens in relationships, right? It's all your fault.
Yeah.
Is it? Nope. It can't be just one person's fault.
But and in my opinion, one of the most effective ways to handle that is, and it takes coming from you got to get yourself into the place first, because you can't have emotion or it won't work. But if I look at it and I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going on with her. I feel okay. I did one tiny thing wrong. I didn't pick up my underwear, and I got she absolutely, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'll just apologize 100% for the piece that I know, no matter how big or small it is. I'm sorry that I did this and that it upset you. And almost every single time, at least with Sam and with my kids and with people close to me, they'll look at it and then immediately be their guard goes down and they're like, well, yeah, it really probably wasn't that upset me so much, or I don't know. It kind of diffuses the entire situation at that point. So even if you do only have a small perceived part in it, if you just own that 100%, whatever your part is, it almost always ends better, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of giving them a different version of you to react to. Mm-hmm. And it's not about your underwear on the ground. I mean, depending how bad your underwear is. Yeah. But I'll just call that out. But what it's about is that's not what the need is. The need is not as simple as just I have a need my happiness is to not have underwear on the ground. No, it's I have felt overwhelmed in life. And one of the things that helps me feel better is having a clear, clean living space.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I see things like this, it immediately triggers that response for me. And so then I go into this mode where I'm sort of, mindlessly lashing out, and then you're receiving that. You're like, oh my God, it's just a pair of underpants. What is wrong with you? And then we start arguing over that, when actually that has nothing to do with the real issue.
Exactly.
And so when you get into that, like, look, I'm sorry, I should have picked them up. If it diffuses the person, I think that's a great opportunity to try to dig into why that's so upsetting.
Sure.
So say, like, I'm really sorry about that. You're right. Like, I shouldn't have done that, and I will do better in the future. Can I talk to you about it some more? Yeah. What I want to understand is, like, obviously it's not great that I did that, but I feel like there's something more to it than that. Can you talk to me about that? Why does it matter to you in the way that it does? Yeah. So I can understand better, not just about the underwear, but more broadly, how I can do better with that. And kind of draw that person out to talk about the happiness that they're looking for.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Like, you're really investigating what happiness they're seeking, that you're, ruffling the feathers of.
And it's also a great way as a partner to help somebody, through something. Like, I don't know. Yeah. It's like, I'm sorry that I didn't put the fork in the dishwasher, but you just really screamed at me loud there. And there's got to be something else bothering you. So why don't we just talk about that?
Yeah.
I mean, that might be the wrong way to go about saying it. I'm sure there's a softer way to say it, but we kind of have.
But that intention, it's what that's what you're trying to get to, is like, of course I can do better with that. I feel like there's more to it though, and I want to make sure that I'm respecting what it is you really care about.
Mm-hmm.
So, talk. And the thing is, like, this all sounds great, but when you're being attacked, can you really, like, stop and be like, oh, I'm so sorry, and tell me about your feelings? But this is the thing, is when you can look at it less of that person is just coming here to attack me,
mm-hmm.
then it usually helps you disarm a bit and step down and not need to be defensive and reacting that way, and let you take the high road. And that's kind of the point, is like seeing that if you appreciate your ability to influence a better outcome by giving them a different version of you to react to, then it's worth you stepping back your need to react blindly and, equally or worse to how they're reacting, because that's not going to solve anything. You're just going to,
go ahead. I didn't know you were.
Well, whatever you, I was going to say, whatever Pat's going to say is probably better. It's just like, if you're just coming down, I hate the word just, it's like an instant signal that what you're about to say is bad. If you just dismiss them or snap at them or judge them or hit back, you can't possibly imagine that the response you're going to get to that will be positive in the same way that yours wasn't.
Right.
So
exactly,
if that's really what you want in life, good for you, but no one really does. Right. You probably want the fighting to come down. And this isn't like, we're talking about, spouses, because it's the context for the show. Like with your boss, you want to go head to head with them over and over again. Your kids, like, you want to drive them out of the house so that they go to their friend's house and like do stuff that you wish they weren't doing that would just make you want to yell at them more. Like you have to look at what is it you're actually trying to achieve, like your own happiness seeking. So if what you care about is not to go toe to toe with them, which I guarantee you it isn't, maybe on the surface, but not under the surface, then think about what would get me to that. Sure. So you can be self-full for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you may see that you kind of both want the same thing. Nobody wants to be fighting and walking on eggshells for 5 days and just kind of, it happened long enough in the past that now we'll just be normal again, but we haven't actually dealt with the problem. So it's going to happen again. Like, that's not how anybody wants to live. That's how I think an overwhelming number, maybe not a majority, but a huge number of marriages operate. It's just like,
we concur.
There's a, and it takes a minute. So when somebody comes at you, like we're talking about, for me, that you have to let your guard down, because as soon as you throw your guard up and you come right back at them, then you've given them an actual reason to now be mad at you. And they might not have been in the beginning. It might have been something else completely. Yeah. So, and our kids are really good at that, by the way. But for me, I think if I can get myself to the point where I remember, and it only takes a minute, sometimes I got to breathe, sometimes I just got to not say anything for a minute and think about it. But where I remember that all anger is a manifestation of fear or hurt, right? Yeah. It's anger isn't real. They're either something scared the crap out of somebody, like somebody cuts you off on the highway and you're like, you son of a, Well, he scared you. That's where it came from, right? And then it scared, and then the other one is
fear, I think.
Yeah.
Well, the other one's hurt. Like somebody's hurting on the inside, and sometimes they just lash out at somebody because they're in pain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, if you can get to that point, you're like, wow, they're either scared or afraid, and then you kind of want to help them more than poke them.
Yeah. Yeah. And how are you going to feel that level of care and compassion when you're too busy feeling attacked?
Sure.
So you have to disarm yourself to be able to disarm them. And that's really that's so much of what the book is about, is trying to help people see past that initial reaction so that they can react differently. Because then you get in this virtuous cycle instead of a vicious cycle.
Exactly.
It's not easy. I'm not here to say it's easy. And it also doesn't always end in like this beautiful tra-la-la, everyone's dancing and running, skipping around, holding hands. Like, I tell this work situation where like better just meant my coworker stopped trying to get me fired.
Yeah.
I'll take it. Like that was a step up for sure. And there's, it doesn't have to be that we get along well.
That's a great story. Do you want to tell that, Bryan?
No.
You don't?
No, I'm just kidding.
You don't have to. If you have a different one that's more marriage related,
no.
But I really like that story because because of a lot of reasons.
Yeah, I mean, so it was really at the same time that issues with my wife were really coming to a head that actually sparked me doing the research that led to this book and my first application of it. At the same time, I had this issue going on with a coworker who I've come to find out later, she had screwed up really badly and covered it up. And she covered it up because, and I definitely identify with this, no one else is smart enough to have fixed it.
Mm-hmm.
So even though she was the cause of it, like she didn't think anyone else was capable of fixing it. So it just had to be her. But if she got caught, if it was discovered before she got to fix it, then she'd have a real problem because she wouldn't be there to fix it. Right. So she was going to hide it until it was fixed. And no one was smart enough to know any better. Well, accidentally, I guess I stumbled into starting to expose it, as did one of my peers. And so she went from being one of my closest friends at work to attacking me nastily. Mm-hmm. And she sent this scathing email to our CEO. So we both reported into him. And it's like all these bullets of all the ways that I was destroying everything and incompetent and how everything that I'm talking about is just dead wrong. So Bryan said this, here's the data, he's wrong. Bryan said this, here's the data, he's wrong. Bryan's doing these things, Bryan's doing those things. And he ends the email with like, he needs to answer for himself. And it's an email to me and our boss with the CFO on CC. So it's good times. So I get this email.
This gives me anxiety.
Yeah. By the way, it's Friday night. Yeah. So it's like, thank you. My weekend needed that. And I can't do anything about it. So normal me would, and like, I'm looking at these bullet points and I'm like, wrong. I have all the data to show that, and I can prove it all. So normally I would explain back to her why she's wrong in this like scathing response. And what I realize is that ain't gonna help. Mm-hmm. Like she's a really skilled litigator. She's an attorney. I'm not going to win going head to head with her. And so, I sent back an email instead that was thanking her for that. I just noted that I had a different interpretation of the data and just said, why don't I find time for all of us to talk? So kind of taking out any ability for a back and forth exchange over the weekend, which I know she was banking on. We go into this meeting and she jumps right in, just ripping me apart. And I had all of my responses laid out in case I needed them. But what I realized is like, if I go head to head, that's not going to work. Mm-hmm. So again, I just said, thank you for that, which I know she wasn't expecting to be thanked. Thank you for that. Like I have a different interpretation of the data and I'm happy to go through that. I pulled the numbers directly from the system. So I feel pretty good about them, but that's not what matters here. Tell me what it is you're hoping for the business. And she was like dumbfounded. She almost didn't know what to say. And then she stated like, I'm worried this is what's going on with the business. I don't want that to be the case. And I want this outcome. And it was really sensible. And she didn't say anything about me getting fired. She's just like, for the business to overcome this rough spot and do better. It's like, how can you disagree with that? So it's like, yeah, I want that too. So she had seen me as a blocker to that mm-hmm. better outcome, because if I expose her, she'll get canned. And now she's like, oh, he wants the same thing as me. And I said, here are some things that I think I can do to help. What do you think? And it's like, well, now he's not just not standing in the way. He's like holding out his hand to help me get there. And so she's like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What if we did this? And we went into like kind of collaborative problem solving. And, I had the CFO at my back because I knew he agreed with me. He reached out to me over the weekend that he knew that was all a lie. The CEO responded to her email with like, thanks, that's a good challenge. And I was like, no, it isn't. It's a lie. Like, it's not a good challenge. But he called me after the meeting and he's like, well done. He's like, I would not have done that. He's like, I would have been screaming because the CFO had gotten to him. He's like, now I know that like none of that was true. You handled that really well. And, I was, like really early in my journey in using the tools that I wrote about. I was like, man, if it worked in that situation, and I have a heart rate monitor in my watch, and it's like my heart rate was in the 60s, which is slightly high for me, but not really.
Right.
It's not like I was like running a marathon. Like I was fine. So it wasn't just me like faking it and secretly like gritting my teeth and, and trying not to look like I was mad. I genuinely was okay. Because I just kept thinking like, it's not about us fighting. It's about me appealing to something that will step her down and stop this argument. And it did. And so like, were we friends again? Never. Could we work together again and not have it be fake, but actually collaborative and productive? Yes. So that to me is better.
Yeah. Do you still work with
and then
her?
then she got pushed out because it all came out.
I was going to say, because
you
tell
it
that
would have
story.
gone differently. Well, like if I had fought, I would have been gone before her.
Yeah.
So there's no question. And it's like, I don't know if that's better or worse. I don't know what the answers are, but like, I do know eventually the truth came out. It's unfortunate for her. She is really smart. She is really talented. She did have a lot of answers. If she had been honest up front, I think we all would have come to her aid and worked together with her. Instead of the way she handled it is why she had to go, not because of the actual problem. And you find this pretty commonly actually.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, so that was an interesting one.
No doubt. We'll keep going about oh, sorry.
I was just going to say that there's 3 different outcomes. There's the one you presented, which most people probably wouldn't even get to. There's the one where you expose her as being the liar and you hadn't done anything wrong. And the only way to do that is to fight. And then there's the one where you feel like you didn't really get any justice. Maybe you're still there, but then a lot of people just quit. They're like, screw this. I'm not going to work for a company that, anyway.
Yeah. And sometimes actually quit's the right answer. So, if there's violence involved or genuine, like addiction or mental illness, and I use the word genuine, like I really mean it there because people will call each other crazy or be like, you're sick. And like, that's not really what it is.
Right.
They may have issues. They may have trauma. It may be showing itself, but let's not just throw these terms around. But barring something like that, if there's violence, then better means that you extract yourself and you do it in a way that doesn't bring the problems following you. You do it in a way that either like they don't actually follow you or it's not carried within you.
Sure.
Like, because whether they're there or not, they're still having power over you and it's still impacting you and you're still reacting to it. So happiness seeking helps us to break from that, even if we're not with the person anymore. And sometimes that is the right. So this is, I try to be pretty clear on this. This isn't like every single relationship will go to like hugging each other and being happy. There's some that need to end. There's some that should go to divorce. Like you guys talk about, if you didn't get divorced, you probably wouldn't be together.
Yep.
Which doesn't sound like it makes any sense, but it has to. So it's really about like, how do we go forward in all of our relationships with some interpretation of better? And that's not a cop out like, oh, well, if you get divorced, that's not better. It's like, really? Well, look at how it is right now.
Is.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is.
Yeah. So it's about better that helps your life out, helps move you to a happier place. So sometimes that does mean the relationship ends.
Yeah. And I know you've got a hard stop and we're a little bit late and we have a few minutes left. If you can give us like
your favorite, most impactful gems that you want to share with people about this book that will motivate them to read it. Because we've read it, we endorse it. We think the ideas are brilliant. I like the way that it's kind of put in a mathematical way for some of us that are a little more on the analytical
Most people
side.
don't like that.
So I like that. I mean, I do. I like that. So
call it nerd speak. There's a little bit of nerd speak in there.
There you go.
It's good.
Yeah. I mean, well, and I should say thank you to both of you for not only did you give me an endorsement, but I convinced you all to read it for the audiobook. because no one likes their own voice. So I really like that I've got someone else did the forward, Tara Harrison, who you guys know, and then I've got your kind of promo bit that pulls in there too, just a break in the voices. Thank God. I can't stand listening to my voice.
Well, we were honored. Thank you for asking us to do it.
So usually the thing I would leave people with is happiness seeking. I think, we've talked about that really well. And I think it should be where people focus, but maybe I'd leave them with a bit of hope. And the other two principles, one is interdependence. That's kind of the mechanism that happiness seeking plays out, because it's how we relate to each other. And that defines our sense of who the other person is, good or bad, nice or mean, etc., in a given situation. But the third one is impermanence. And this is the point of hope. So impermanence is the idea that everything changes. Like it's that old adage, the only constant is change, right? So if you thought that nothing changes, or that person will be mean to you forever, or they'll never understand, or any of those other kind of permanent ways of viewing it, why would you ever bother trying to make things work better? Why would you ever bother trying to figure out their happiness or yours and coming from that perspective? You wouldn't, because it's pointless. So if you recognize that everything changes, then it's like, okay, even these tough things change. Like if nothing else, that person will age. That's change.
Yeah.
They could have other experiences that just like nudge the door ever so slightly. Like think about them when they were like 3 years old versus right now. You think they're the same person?
Yeah.
No.
They probably weren't an asshole at 3.
Probably not. They're just a jerk, just a little jerk. But now, well, we all know those 3-year-olds are like, oh my God, I hope they're not bringing their kid.
Right. We do.
I don't know those. Every kid's amazing. Including me when I was a kid. I wasn't a handful at all. But
I'm sure that's true.
Yeah, no.
No ways.
I found my elementary school report cards. Holy crap.
Really?
I was like,
good, huh?
I was like, my teacher said some really nasty things about me, very tongue in cheek. And I just didn't understand. I'm like, oh, that was nice. And now I'm reading, I'm like, wow, like you're really clever and sarcastic. Anyway. But so everyone changes, even if only slightly. And so that means that it's worth putting in the work, because you should have hope that work will pay off, because they can change too, even if you think it's impossible. So I like that message.
I love that message. And I think it's true. Yeah. When people say people can't change, I say bullshit. People are always changing constantly.
Every day.
Every day. Every moment,
Yeah.
I change how I think every single day. I might wake up and say, I need to go on a diet. And then 10 minutes later, I'm like, tomorrow.
Do a day, man.
Yeah,
Do a day.
Yeah.
Do a day.
Yeah.
All right. This is your opportunity to shamelessly plug your everything. Well, we do that at the beginning too, but do it again.
Well, so I'm so torn between giving my personal website, which means people have to figure out how to spell my name. It's bryanfalchuk.com, or the book's website, which is easier because you can spell numbers. Only just type in the numbers.
So it's
it's bryanfalchuk.com, and I'm at Bryan Falchuk all over social. But then the book itself has a site. It's 5075100.com, and it's 5075100. It's just the numbers. That's easier, I hope, if you can remember them.
Yeah,
it's really easy. And then see your name on that website too, and spell it right, and then go to the other one.
I should register my name misspelled too, because enough people, they're like, your site's down, and they write back, and I'm like, no, that's not my name. So that could be why.
I made that mistake too, actually, trying to find you after we met.
Yeah,
it was like,
you even had my book.
Then I dug the book out. That is what I had to do. I had to go get the book, and I was like, I'm spelling it wrong.
That's my mother's best friend's idea, to spell my name with a Y. Yeah. And she's very nice, but I think I always hold a little bit of that inside of me. I'm like, every name tag has been wrong because of you.
But even Falchuk is a little bit tricky, right?
Yeah.
Just buy the other domain and point it to your other website. And
that's what I got to do. Yeah. I better do that now before this episode goes out, because someone else will do it and squat.
Buy it and sell it back to you for $500.
Dang it. Yeah. I'm not worth that much. So bryanfalchuk.com, BRYANFALCHUK, or 5075100.com.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Anything else you want to say before we go?
No, I'm psyched to connect with you guys. It's fun. You were a lot of fun to be around in person.
Ditto.
And likewise on having some time with you over Zoom.
Yeah. It's been good. And let's stay in touch. I can't wait to see, where you go with all this.
Yeah, and we got to get you on my show too.
Oh yeah, we will do that. We would love that.
Good.
All right,
cool.
Bryan.
Yeah, Bryan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.